Hi, I'm Dr. Quentin Morris, artist scholar in residence here at Classical King FM, and welcome to another video episode of Unmute the Voices. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing to you someone who is first a personal friend of mine. I've known this young man for a long time. He is an incredible cellist and composer, amazing musician, and just all-around great guy. This is someone who has an international career, someone who has really let life events help inspire him as a musician, as a composer who has been able to influence so many other people in the classical music world. Joining me today is Caleb Vaughn-Jones, and I'm happy to present him to you. Caleb, welcome to Unmute the Voices.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morris. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Really? You're calling me Dr. Morris on this show?
Yes, I am, Doctor. You know.
That just feels so weird because we've been friends for a very long time.
Yeah,
you know?
For everybody that doesn't know, we call him Q. But yeah.
Yes. I'm Q, and the other thing that I think we should just kind of mention as a fun fact is I was the best man in your wedding.
That is true. My wedding in South Africa, of all places.
In South Africa. Man, can you just explain to people what was it like living in South Africa, and what was it like getting married in South Africa?
South Africa compared to the US is life is a lot slower. And I would say people tend to appreciate the more basic things in life more than we do here. I think things are so fast paced, and we tend to gloss over a lot of things in life. But there, it's every birthday matters. Recitals, all of the small stuff. It's like it's a big deal, and that's something that I've tried to hold on to now that we're back here in the U.S. So yeah.
How long were you living in South Africa?
About 2 weeks short of 9 years. Yeah. So
9 years?
9 years. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what brought you to South Africa?
So I originally went to South Africa to work with the Eastern Cape Philharmonic Orchestra on this project that they had called the Music Investment Project. And in that project, we were working in the townships, townships and I guess I would call it the disadvantaged communities. And we were teaching music there. There was, an orchestra. And then I was, obviously playing principal cello in the orchestra as well. So it was a great adventure. Just seeing all the different obstacles the students would have to get over, in order to just, play music and take lessons and try to excel. A lot of the students, didn't have basic necessities like electricity and running water. So asking them to practice at night, when they're living in a, one bedroom shack, like literally a shack, it's almost impossible for some of them. So it just makes you realize how blessed we are here in the US, So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because the life that people in South Africa have is very different from here in the United States. And I remember going to visit you a couple of times, actually, when you lived in Port Elizabeth, and seeing the extreme poverty that the people and the students had while they were there. What would you say inspired you most, and can you give me an example of something that inspired you as a musician while you were there, and how that has kind of how have you been able to bring that inspiration back to the States?
Yeah, I would say with the South African people, especially, people who went through apartheid, the black and what so-called colored people, they are quite resilient, and so they may experience, the mom, dad died before the age of 6, dealing with, things like tuberculosis and, all these diseases that they're plagued with. And obviously economically it's very tough. And, when you hear them sing, and make music, it's like such joy. It's incredible. But that's why I say the small things matter, because they realize how short life is. It's not infinite, so it puts things into perspective, and you're constantly reminded of this. Just an example, the majority of my students had never been to a wedding, but they go to funerals every single weekend almost. It's like such part of the culture. It's like funeral. I'm going to a funeral. I'm not able to show up because I'm going to a funeral. You know what I mean? So that's how it is, especially in the townships. So yeah.
And how has that affected you personally?
Yeah, just, I wake up every morning and I'm very grateful, like basic stuff, just coming back here, just like having air conditioning, and know that the water is going to be running and it's clear, not yellow. Just real basic stuff that we can take for granted, and I think even musically, it's just, it's like I realized that, especially composing, it's like you realize that the order of the notes can like totally like, grip somebody. And so, even that kind of stuff, it's like, man, we can tell stories as musicians and really have a great impact on people. And, I must say that's really why I was interested in going to South Africa, is to expand my experience as a musician, so that when I do go on stage, it feels like I have purpose. Because I started feeling like, I was 24, 25. I started feeling like, playing for people that are, life is great, and that's fine. But to make music for people who have real adversity is something to experience, I must say.
That is so beautiful. And the one thing, just as you were speaking, I'm remembering of one of the first places that you lived, in Port Elizabeth. It had no heat, or
Yep.
very little heat.
No heat.
No heat. And and I just really admire you for going through that experience, and I learned a tremendous amount just watching you teach, and watching you in the different townships, and hearing the stories of the people. I was just so moved and touched by that. And of course you went there. Not only did you do this amazing service for the people, but you also fell in love and got married and have a child. And so as an American, what has that been like, of now integrating into the South African family culture? What's that been like?
It's been really great. It it really changed my experience in South Africa, because it's Sunday lunches, after church is like, that's a thing. There's a pot of curry. My wife's family is what they call, colored. So it's like, there's so many foods, that are, very common there. And I fell in love with them. I could go on about the food. It's amazing. But it's great. There's a lot of family events and, cookouts, what they call a braai. And it's been good. And it really helped me to get a real feel for the country and even the history of the country, hearing some of my relatives talk about, what it was like during apartheid era, and my wife, like, I sometimes forget what it was like for her as a child. We were just talking about the movie Lion King. And I said, oh yeah, that movie came out in 94. It was right around the time of the apartheid or whatever. And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, you didn't see it in the movie theater? And then when I said it, I realized she wasn't allowed to go to the movie theaters until after the end of apartheid. It was against the law. And so it's one of those things that we just kind of, as I said, like in America, we know it, but we don't know it, and it's easy to forget that history is so recent, and so a lot of people are still, dealing with it, firsthand experience. So, yeah.
So that's just so heartwarming. What do you think Americans need to do in order to just have a deeper appreciation for history and for culture? Having this immersive experience for the last 9 years in South Africa, what sort of advice would you give to Americans to experience culture and to have a deeper appreciation for other backgrounds?
Yeah, that's it's one of those things I always, the best way to do it is travel, if you can. Not everybody has the means to travel overseas. It can be very pricey. But, added to that is, if you do travel, a lot of people tend to stay in resorts in the more developed areas. But if you can really try to surround yourself with, people that are living life, in that country, man, it'll really give you some perspective of what it's really like, because, it's easy to go to Johannesburg or Cape Town and stay in the Hilton, and it's not going to be much different from what you experience here in the US. But, if you go and stay with a family, it'll be a lot different. So, yeah, that's probably what I would say. The fastest way is to actually go there and experience it.
So since being back here in the States, what's that been like for you? I mean, have you experienced culture shock or,
yeah, that's a good question. I don't think culture shock, but I must say it's one thing I do realize that it's a lot different from what it used to be even 9 years ago. There's just politically things are a lot more tense, more divided, I think, than when I left. So that's something that I realized, and even just the media is just a lot different than South Africa, I think. And I didn't realize it while I was there, but the journalism in South Africa is really, really great because they just tell the news. And here it's like all colored. You can't really tell what's going on. This network has a slant towards a political party. The other one's going the other way. So yeah, that's a lot different. So, and then obviously I came to LA just 3 days before the shutdown with the coronavirus. So, it was weird times just all around. So, yeah.
Wow. Moving in the middle of a pandemic with your family.
Well, and that was the craziest part. I mean, my family wasn't even with me because I come, a bit earlier to, set things up, and then they were going to come maybe 2 months later. But because of coronavirus, I landed here in March, and I didn't see my family until December, just before Christmas. So we were separated almost the whole year.
Wow.
So,
how was that for you?
It was tough, especially when, you have my daughter was 2 for most of that year last year and turned 3, and so much happens with a kid, that, you don't experience. So, yeah, it was tough. But at the end of the day, I think it was God's will, and, and you just make the best of it. And so, when they finally came, that's when it really felt like, all right, now we're in this thing. Like, because I always felt like I had the option, like, oh, if I don't like it, I could just go back because they're still there, but now it's just feel like it's stuck, So, yeah, it's been good.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about musically of what have been some of your influences being back here in the States. I mean, how have you been able to bring that experience from being in South Africa for 9 years back here to the States, and how has that influenced you as a performer and as a composer?
Yeah, in South Africa, the musical genres are very diverse. There's, obviously you have all of your traditional, African music, but then there's modern music like Kwaito and what they call and I probably didn't even say that right, but yeah, so that's like beat driven music, and then you have, you know, some of the Afrikaans music, and yeah, it's so crazy. But like harmonically things are different, and like I started, you know, picking up a lot of that kind of stuff and incorporating it into my music. And obviously rhythmically you just can't help it. It's like, you know, once you hear it, it's hard to get away from it. So, yeah.
So lots of different rhythms and lots of different harmonies, it sounds like. Do you incorporate that into the music that you write?
Definitely. I'm actually working on a piece now. I'm almost finished with it. And the second movement is like, I've dedicated it to South Africa totally, you know. And so there's a lot of that Afro jazz vibe in there. Yeah. So it's great.
So for the American who is not as familiar with South African music, what's your go-to? Can you give me your 1, 2, 3 composers or pieces that you're like, you've got to listen to this?
Well, I mean, I think most people, well, I won't say most, a lot of people in the U.S. know of Lady Blacksmith Mambazo, Lady Smith Black Mambazo. And, you know, they've been well known for a while because they've won Grammys and things like that. And they've done recordings with Paul Simon. But I would say a really good group, when I first arrived, a group that kind of caught my attention was a group called Freshly Ground. And I think they caught the nation's attention in South Africa because that group is so diverse, like racially diverse, and they just have like this vibe about them, like really cool rhythms, and they're singing in Zulu and Xhosa and English, and it's just so that's South Africa. That's what South Africa looks like, and it is. So they're a cool group. I went to a concert of this a cappella group called The Soil. They're a lot of fun. Yeah. And so, yeah, those are some groups. There's another group called Mafiki Zolo. Great. So yeah, there's all kinds of great music. And then obviously you have all the jazz guys like Hugh Masekela, who just, you know, rest in peace, passed away a few years ago. So yeah, there's a lot of guys. It's incredible.
So what we will do for all of the viewers is include those pieces and those composers into the playlist that you can view. You submitted a very interesting playlist for the radio show, and I want to talk a little bit about that because it's quite eclectic and very diverse. First, of course, the pieces that you have written. Tell me about these pieces. First, I want to talk about piece number 1 and also the waltz. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about those 2 pieces in particular. What was the inspiration behind those 2 pieces that you wrote?
Yeah, so with violin piece number 1, I actually wrote that piece, you know, during the pandemic. And I just kind of like started moving, you know, trying to like move out, you know, and just trying to find a place. So I was living in Koreatown in Los Angeles. And I just remember feeling like, you know, I want to write some music that makes me calm, you know, because it just felt like the whole year was feeling so chaotic, and I didn't know what it would be like, what it would end like, you know. I didn't know when I would see my family again, nothing, you know. So I was just, you know, just going day to day, and so yeah, I wrote that piece, really simple melody, and I tend to write the melody first, and so I wrote a melody that was kind of almost infectious. And so I was just like, all right, I like this melody, you know, I can do something with it. And then, you know, I wrote the accompaniment after that. And then obviously, you know, I'm trying to write something that kids can relate to as well. And so I'm trying to emotionally connect on that level that, you know, a student would be able to connect on. So, yeah. And then with the waltz, yeah, so that one is like, you know, your typical, you know, waltz. And yeah, with that one, it's just kind of, you know, joy again, like trying to escape. A lot of escapism. So yeah, yeah, so with that is you know, just trying to have something that's light and not too heavy, and not too difficult to listen to, and not too difficult to play as well. So it's kind of that combination. So yeah.
So full confession, while we were setting up for this show, our videographer, Sung, said, that piece number one, I was singing it for like almost a week. Like I had it stuck in my head.
Yeah. For me, that's like that's the secret sauce right there. It has to,
Well, that makes me feel good, because when we were talking about you composing these pieces for our students, for the students in Key to Change Studio, I said that I wanted you to write pieces that were memorable, that people would be able to hear.
Right.
So I want to just go now and have you watch the pieces that Anne-Maria Strand, who is a student in the Key to Change Studio, and I want to get your reaction to the performance that she gave of your pieces.
All right, let's do it. That's a great shot. Great job.
So, what's your experience watching a student play those pieces?
Yeah, first and foremost, Anne-Maria has really improved because it's been a few months since I've heard her. She sounds great. Like really,
She does sound good, doesn't she? She's
yeah,
got a beautiful tone.
Her tone is really improved. It's amazing.
Yeah. You've been playing for a couple of years too.
Yeah, you told me. So it's good for her. Yeah, I remember the first time when we did one of the classes at night, and one of the kids started playing. I was like, man, this is so cool, you know. Yeah, so it's great. Yeah, I like it. Not to be like egotistical or anything, but it's cool.
Well, I mean, it is your music, so
I think my initial thought is I'm glad the piano part works. So yeah, that's like normally what I'm thinking.
Is that something that composers worry about? Is like you write the melody and then you put in the piano part next to it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I hope this all works out. Like, is that kind of a fear of yours that it won't?
I won't say a fear, but yeah, it's a reality. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. You know, I work with composers all the time here in the film studios, and sometimes I write a part, you know, especially for the woodwinds, like they want it like pianissimo, but it's in like a super high register, and they're like, I can't play that softly, So it's something that you learn over time, but I've heard of some of the greatest composers really having to figure that kind of stuff out. So yeah, it's a learning experience every time.
And for the viewers who don't know, pianissimo means very soft versus fortissimo, that is very, very loud. So I'm sure that it just brings you so much joy to be able to pass on, in a sense, kind of your musical legacy onto a younger generation of students who will continue to play your music even after, we've kind of, morphed on to the next world, that your music will still live on. That has to be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and even more so, I'm glad that, the students actually enjoy it. Because, I mean, I remember, as a student, there's a lot of stuff you play and you're kind of like, this is terrible, would you do it? So I'm glad they're having fun with it, and it's something that I hope it's motivating them to actually get better in practice and all of that. So, yeah.
Well, those are two pieces that are on the playlist for Unmute the Voices. Some other pieces that are on, that you chose that are on our playlist include Jessie Montgomery. Of course, man, she's killing it right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, killing it.
Why'd you choose that piece?
It was just so cool. Like the textures, I was like, man, this is, and most people, out of that album that she released, Strom and Banner get a lot of the attention, but something about the textures that are created in that are just really amazing. So yeah, I thought that was like, people need to hear that one for sure.
Yeah, and that piece is performed by the Public Quartet, which
That's
is
right.
an amazing
also
quartet.
killing it.
Yeah, they are definitely killing it. And I wanted to ask you, in your playlist, the Jessie Montgomery piece, and I feel personally like there's a bit of a parallel between the Jessie Montgomery piece and also George Walker. George Walker is the first African-American composer to win a Pulitzer Prize. And the piece that you chose, I feel there is some direct correlation or at least influence between the Montgomery and also the Walker. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I was trying to pick a lot of pieces that were American in particular, and so you can hear that sort of tonal landscape is like very similar, and so yeah, there's a certain feeling that you get when you hear it, especially if you're familiar with some of their backgrounds, New York City, Philadelphia, you know what I mean? Those are places that we've been to a lot. My dad's from Philly, and so yeah, yeah, definitely there's a certain vibe that I get, and I'm all about that sort of thing. When I hear a piece, it's like, especially for the first time, I'm always very like conscious of like how I feel, what I feel, what I mean, my reaction to it, because that's something you never get back. Like once you hear a piece, that's over, what I mean? So what you feel that first time around is like extremely important. So yeah.
Sure. I have one last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You have traveled the world. You're a composer. You're a performer. You also have your own studio. You have a production company. You are doing so many wonderful things. You have a family. If you had to go back and talk to Caleb Vaughn-Jones, who was 10 years younger than you are right now, what sort of advice would you give him?
That's a good question. I think so. 10 years ago, wow, I was in South Africa. I think I would tell myself probably just focus on the things that really matter. Because I think I spent a lot of time stressing about things that don't matter, and, things like music definitely matter. But things about, I don't know, silly stuff in life, just don't really make the cut. So, I wish I spent more time just doing things like composing or practicing, instead of worrying about what my colleagues were doing and, the politics of orchestras and things like that. So, yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us on Unmute the Voices. Caleb, you're an inspiration, someone that I love and adore, and I'm a huge fan of yours. And
thank you.
I just want to thank you for the contributions, which I think are major to our field, both as a performer and also as a composer.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and all the best with the show. This is amazing. Congrats.
Thank you. You can join us for another episode of Unmute the Voices next time. We appreciate you all tuning in and watching us and learning more about Caleb Vaughn-Jones. If you'd like to learn more about Unmute the Voices, please visit our YouTube page, where you can learn not only about the amazing contributions that Caleb has brought to our industry, but other artists who have also made wonderful contributions to classical music. Until next time, thank you and have a great day.